It was the 21st of March, and it's Tuesday is our new moon observance day. And the monastics were just up at the Monks Utility Building reciting our Patimokkha. Ampor did a beautiful job reciting that after, I think, almost 50 years. And it's very inspiring to hear him chant that. And to know that he's been doing it for 50 years.
A very long gap.
Okay, well, there were some gaps, but I don't think it makes it any less inspiring. So, so just reflecting on this life. I'm personally just coming out of a solitary retreat of a month, and I was definitely delighting in solitude, and really enjoyed that, and that came with a lot of appreciation and gratitude for being able to actually do something like that, which required some of the other monks here and Anagarkas supporting that, especially the retreat crew supporting that, and then of course all of the people who make the generous offerings to support the monastery, to have kutis and robes, all these requisites. So it's just sort of a feeling of delight in others' generosity, and a delight in that sense of goodness, and that I can actually partake in that goodness and be a benefactor of it. So it's one of the things I'm just recognizing now is the coming out of solitude like this is the activity of the mind, how that can affect the mind, just being around others and engaging again, and being responsible. And there's a very strong felt sense of that. It's a difference that occurs. And there's also, that comes with that, a feeling of like something's wrong, something isn't right. Like, why is this? Why are there feelings that are of dukkha, or some difficulty, or some problems within the mind? Feeling of raciness, or especially notions of the future, and thinking about the future, what's to be done, the mind starts to become more active. And I just relate that over to the last almost 3 months. So it's been almost been about 11 of 12 and a half weeks, something like that. It's a long time of practice. And I think it's helpful for those of us, all of us here at the monastery we've been engaging in this, just to kind of have a sense of that. We do understand that time is something that is quite illusory, and it's comes with a lot of causes and conditions. We can feel things are dragging on for just very long periods of time, excruciating long periods where we don't know if we can deal with it, and yet that can just be 45 minutes. Other times it can be like days and weeks go by so quickly we're just amazed it's March already. And so in regards to that, though, there's a sense of like that something has passed, there has been some change. Many of us entered the retreat in one way or another, and then we've gone on a particular journey within our own minds. And often a lot of that journey is defined by the expectations we've had. The expectations we've had of whether something was going to be good or not, or whether it was good. And also, hopefully, thinking about that word good. What is the experience of that? That sense of how do I define what was good for me? Is it based on pleasantness? Did I have pleasant experiences, pleasant mind states, meditations that were quite peaceful? And is that, that's what good is. And then we might think that when we struggle, and there's a lot of difficulty, there's pain, sometimes we want to, just cry or go shrink back in some corner or just sleep through it. And that's considered quite negative, painful, difficult, and not working. And it's helped to reflect on the sutta that Lumpur spoke about, where he talked about how the Buddha said that it's better to live in a more wild, forested situation, where we're surrounded by nature, and yet we're having a lot of difficulty within our own minds. The practice is coming with a lot of difficulty and struggle. Than it would be to be surrounded by city walls and cars, and the Buddha didn't say cars, but the senses as being like really encroached by people, and yet have an easy time, have a pleasant meditations, and why is that? Because it's where you think about what we're capable of. One is just to have that space, of solitude, and how helpful it is. I think it was Mahakachana would talk about that when he talked about his experience of, why he would still go and practice in extreme ways out in very secluded places in the forest when he was already an arahant. And he found that still just really beneficial for him. And once more, it also inspired others to do the same. And so there's, when there's not activity, we do have the possibility to really understand our own minds in a more peaceful, settled way. But we always have to deal with activity in a certain way or another. We have to come back to that. But that seeking of seclusion and seeking of quiet places is very important for our practice, and it's something that we can try to engage in as much as possible and try to bring about. So we do want to be careful of kind of the conditions we surround ourselves in, and the people we surround ourselves with. So Lumpur was talking about our taking a refuge. Our refuge is in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And what does that really mean? Because from a theoretical point of view, it seems like, okay, yeah, these are the ways I go for safety, and we can think about that and believe in these refuges. But as Lumpur was mentioning earlier this evening, speaking to the monastics, it's a lived experience, taking refuge. It's a lived experience, what we're actually doing on this retreat. And the more that we get stuck in our heads around our thoughts about things and our own practice and where our practice is at and where it should be and why my mind isn't the way I want it to be, we're still living in our own heads. We're living with our thoughts and our own confusions. And we're basing this on ideals. And we can do that with our own inspiration. We can say, oh, I'm so inspired by this. I'm inspired by this particular monk, or I'm inspired by this practice, or I'm inspired by something, and then we ride on that inspiration until that inspiration burns out, which it usually does. As the mind is ephemeral, there is always change, there's anicca. And so then we lose that, sometimes that sense of inspiration, we feel low, as I was mentioning before, and then the mind is back into its sometimes negative states, difficult states, and this becomes a problem, and I'm not inspired anymore, so then I want to give up. And that is something very important to pay attention to. Because no matter what happens with our practice, it's likely, unless we were born as an arhat, which is not possible, we're going to experience some sort of dukkha in our lives, and some difficulty. And yet thinking about how the Buddha talked about struggle and dukkha and the effort that's needed to be made, the sense of patient endurance that we want to be emphasizing so much in our practice, it is dealing with these problems that come up in our minds. And a pleasant meditation, a pleasant experience is quite important. It's very helpful. It does lead us onward. It does give us the happiness and the pleasure that we need to actually have a sense that there is some goodness that we can engage with, we can understand, we can be a part of. It'd be pretty difficult if it was just constant suffering, but to expect that we won't experience that suffering along the way, then it causes a problem for us. And especially when we think that it's getting in the way, that difficulties or problems they shouldn't be there. And I think that's it's just a trap that's very common, but we want to try to more emphasize with ourselves that this is learning. This is how learning occurs. And so, we just keep working with our own failures, our own beliefs in our selves being utterly foolish or wrong or stupid sometimes. And then we sometimes get that aha moment, that sense of, right, oh yeah, this is all an illusion. I'm just creating this sense of me being wrong, me being in this permanent, not this state that's just not going to work. And it's a sense of non-acceptance. So when we accept those difficulties, those problems along the way, in our journey, then it makes this practice and this engagement with the Buddha's teachings just so much easier, because we don't put up sort of boundaries or a sense of what should or shouldn't be happening. And I think that's where this sense of refuge really is helpful. This lived experience with refuge is saying, like, well, what is it that I'm giving myself to? And what am I willing to go through to realize the end of suffering? And so that does become an actual giving up, a letting go into. And that's what that sense of refuge is really about. We're seeking a place of safety, but we know that safety doesn't always mean that it's to feel good all the time. Because then it's just like, sort of Buddhist therapy. It's like this is gonna allow me to cope with life. I'm just trying to learn how to cope. But Nibbana is really beyond coping. And so one of the things that I really appreciated that Lumpur was talking about was that when we have a refuge and we're willing to give ourselves to it, we give ourselves to the Sangha, we give ourselves to the Buddha, give ourselves to the Dhamma, then we're letting go of our own cherished sense of who and what we are. This is for me, this is what I need, this is how I have to have it. It has to play out in this particular way. And so that's where the refuge is. It's really like seeking safety in that sense of giving up me, my needs and my particular views and opinions, and the safety that we might tend to go towards is a different kind of refuge. The refuge of me and my comforts and my own happiness, and my own sense that if I'm not experiencing peace and happiness all the time, then something's wrong, rather than a refuge in understanding and learning the Dhamma. So when, just in thinking about this retreat, it's very helpful to think about, what have I learned? What have I learned about my own mind? What have I learned about how the Buddhist teaching has really helped me understand how I really get myself into trouble and how I can bring myself out of that. And of course, nobody likes suffering. I mean, maybe some people do, but it's understandable that when it's unpleasant and difficult, it's difficult with the path. It's just hard. It's hard to kind of keep that inspiration up sometimes. But we want to try to recognize that. Even in a retreat like this, it's like, you kind of see a peak, and you experience something in your practice that's quite lovely and enjoyable, and or you gain some more understanding, or an insight arises. But then, a week later, it's just like it can just be mired in complete dukkha and thinking it'll just never end. And then we see over the course of a 3-month retreat like this that it's just doing that over and over and over again. There's one peak after the next valley, and then so we're learning how to see that as just being okay. It's not. We don't have to have this progression of the mind just getting brighter and brighter until I did it, realized Nibbana after 3 months. Which, great if that happened, but for most of us, I don't think that's usually the reality. But there is the reality of understanding, the reality of learning, and really having a sense, a very deep sense of how each of us has engaged personally in this practice, and for the last 3 months really had some understanding, had some sense of nuance from the mind, and how we can better utilize the Buddha's teachings, the insights we've gained. And it's important to be honest with ourselves, because we might, I haven't had any insights, it's just been nothing. Wow, I don't know, just living in community, one gains insights, understandings. Living with the Dhamma. So I'm just encouraging us, as we're coming to an end of this formal retreat time, to try to examine our perspective and how we've been looking at our own experience. How we're looking right now, for example, as I'm talking about this. Is there really an ending to this? There's sort of an ending of a gathering of us doing this in a particular way, and with the retreat crew being here. But it doesn't have to exactly end in the same way. We don't have to see it in that way. We can try our best to just see the opportunities we continue to have to practice this teaching. And that's, it's very difficult, as I started out the talk, just talking about the active quality of the mind and where it wants to go. And for myself, just facing kind of the responsibilities that I have and some of the projects that we're going to be engaging in just a couple weeks, assuming I'm still here, still alive, then, as well as everybody else, then, the mind can move into that active sense. And it's very normal and natural, but what is unhelpful is to think, oh, this is terrible, this isn't right, and it shouldn't be this way. And or the mind's, oh, we should be on retreat all the time. Why can't we be on retreat all the time? Well, if we were on retreat all the time, or what would that be like? Probably wouldn't be any food, wouldn't be any shelters, wouldn't be any roads, wouldn't be any paths, wouldn't be any buildings here. It just doesn't quite work. We need to maintain, we need to take care of those physical aspects of our lives that take care of us. But again, this doesn't have to change the mindset. So as the mind is becoming more active and activated, then that becomes our object. That becomes what we study and what we can take a great interest in, rather than thinking or lamenting that something's wrong or it's not working, or I can only be in this particular condition when it's quiet and peaceful. So as this next period, transition period, occurs for us, and we have a 1-week group practice that we're going to be engaging in, just kind of working with the mind as it's having its ups and downs, and knowing that there's some sort of looming end, but also notice that we're creating that end for ourselves. We're creating that sense of like what's going to happen next. And for me, I've seen it happen year after year, just that sense of the mind speeding up and what's going to happen, what am I going to be doing, where am I going to be going, and just to use that as an object of contemplation, just bringing the mind back and reminding ourselves of that refuge. What is it we're seeking safety in? Is it worldly goals, ambitions, activities? Or is it just to keep understanding the mind and sometimes restraining the mind when it's getting out of hand, but also really just emphasizing, well, again and again, what am I learning here? So I will leave that for tonight, and we'll start our 5 a.m. puja tomorrow. So wish everyone well, and thank you for listening.